Test 1, 2, 3.
All right, is everyone ready? So welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee of October 18th. As the name suggests, we are a committee of the board made up of electoral area directors. And we make recommendations on issues related to land use and the delivery of services in the electoral areas. And we respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territories of 10 First Nations peoples, the Kwatsan, the Pakwashan, Malahat, Subasset, Dididat, Pachidat, Halalt, Liaxin, Penelakut, and Suminas. And we offer our gratitude to the First Nations for their care of the earth and their teachings about our earth. We hope we're able to bring those respectfully to the work we do in this committee. I have a couple of things that I'd like to touch bases before we do the agenda approval. First of all, welcome Alternate Director Amber Champ, sitting in for Sierra Acton today. And congratulations to Director McClinton, who will be very tired at these meetings for the next little while, because he and his wife brought in Abel into the world, and that's a nice addition to the world, I think. I'd also like to bring attention to a misleading article on the front page of The Citizen, which says CVRD approves a $100 million active transportation plan. Now, we did not do that. We approved an active transportation plan for the region, but there is no funding attached to that plan when we approved it. It is a plan that will help us leverage grant opportunities over the next 10, 20 years. So that's what the plan is about. No dollars attached. And so then before we move on to the agenda, do any directors have anything they'd like to announce? All right, I'll turn to the corporate secretary.
Thank you, Chair. We have the approval of the agenda, and there was 3 additional items added this morning. That the agenda be amended to add supplemental correspondence received for item R4 regarding the report from the Development Services Division application number RZ23B01. 3068 Renfrew Road, PID 006 410065. And those are emails from October 16th, 14th, and 15th from Baran McCartney, Roy and Heather Todd, as well as Sabine Trottier. And that the agenda be approved as amended, please.
Do I have a motion and a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on.
Thank you, Chair. We have the adoption of the minutes from the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of October 4th. Be adopted.
Do I have a motion? I have a motion, mover and a seconder. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. M2, that the minutes of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of October 5th be adopted.
And it's been moved and seconded, and everyone who's in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you, Chair. There's no business arising from the minutes, but we have now the public input period. The public input period is to offer the public an opportunity to comment on the agenda items before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items on the agenda up to a maximum of 3 minutes. This excludes items that may, are, or have been subject to a public hearing, and the speaker should comment in a polite, calm, and courteous manner using respectful language, civility, and decorum.
Of course. Do I have anyone who would like to make a comment for public input? Please come up to the mic, state your name, and what agenda item you're speaking to.
My name is Roy Todd.
Oh, sorry, the mic has to go on too. Great. Thanks, Cliff.
Hello. My name is Roy Todd, and I'm referring to R4, the Services Division application number RZ23801-308 Renfrew Road. I am strongly opposed to this application. I am directly beside this piece of property, and it is not a suitable location for more housing in that area. I have a well that gets 2 gallons a minute, and if more houses are put in this area, it has a danger of depleting my well and even restricting water more than it is right now. And there's no public transportation like buses or any other public transportation that to service any houses or homes that might be built in there. And these are my main concerns about this property, and I hope that it will be denied. Well, I thank you.
Thank you very much for your input.
My name is Heather Todd, and I live with Roy on the property adjacent. And also what comes up as an issue is that this may be subdivided down to 10 acres right now, but who's to say in the future that it won't be subdivided down further into 2 if this gentleman does sell the property to another developer or whatever. So that's one of our concerns on the road also. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Anyone else? Welcome.
Madam Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake, and I'm a director of the Shawnigan Basin Society. Madam Chair, I notice on today's agenda in R10 that the report from the General Manager of Land Use Services is asking for authorization to push more development permits through, and I think that's a great thing. But included in that are the riparian areas, and we have to be very, very careful with them at this time. We have been working with the Department of Fisheries, that's a Canadian government organization, in the past, and we'll be working with them again as we work with the Cowichan watershed and with the CBRD. And I noticed that the fisheries officers have fast ways of looking at a riparian zone and coming up with answers. And so I got their little secret from them, and it's an acronym called HADD, H-A-D-D. And they look at a riparian zone, and they say, is there something harmful being done, alteration being done, or disruption, or destruction of salmon habitat? And this has happened quite a bit in our watershed, and I've been with them when they've closed down a gravel pit that was washing gravel and letting the water go right into Shawnigan Creek. And of course, we had dead coho fry. And I'm telling you, those guys go right in and they close them down like right now. And when the owner went to court, they're not $250 fines. They can fine corporations in the millions. And so these guys mean business when they come around. We'll be working with them, and we're helping them in any way we can. And so when we look at any of our projects, we should be maybe thinking, are any of these things done? Can we do anything different? And it's all about saving the environment and saving the fish. We had a good rain last night, 30 millimeters at our place. I was down at the creek today. Ken Gray from the Conservation Society was down there and said that fish are now coming into Mill Bay, and we'll be doing that. So when we look at these projects, we have to make sure that they're not done in inclement weather, that we give the coho fry a chance, and hopefully everyone's happy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, anyone else? I don't think so.
Hello.
Would you state your name again, please?
My
sir?
name is Roy Todd.
Thank you.
I'm the neighbor directly adjacent to this property. There's also a fish-bearing stream that goes through the middle of this property, and it could and probably would endanger this habitat and riparian areas that the fish need to survive, and I would like you to take that into consideration also.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's move on.
Thank you, Chair. We have D5 delegations. We have Patrick Oystrick from Modus regarding the official community plan for the electoral areas for Schedule G and L online, I believe.
Welcome, Patrick. Oh, I see you.
Hello.
There you are.
Yes, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here virtually to present some of the key changes that we've made in the OCP, particularly referencing Schedule G and Schedule L, so the growth containment boundaries as well as the land use designations as part of the official community plan for the electoral areas. So I'm just going to share my screen and go through a quick presentation before opening it up for questions or comments. All right, so as I mentioned, today's presentation is really to go over and review the key changes that were made to two of the OCP's schedules, in particular the mapping done for the growth containment boundaries, Schedule G, and the land use designations, Schedule L. So starting off with the growth containment boundaries, in this case, I'm just using a map that shows electoral areas D and E, but the purpose is to show a key change that we've made in the representation of the growth containment boundaries. And so in the past, we've only used a line around them, but we've also now shaded the interior of the line to be much clearer about which parts of the region are included within a growth containment boundary as opposed to outside. So that's just a little graphic change that we've made to clarify what is within a growth containment boundary versus outside. Another key change that we've made is in Area G. So this is a change that was made in consultation with the director, but particularly in relation to existing zoning entitlements that exist within the community of Saltaire. So in this case, the growth containment boundary in Area G has been expanded to match the underlying zoning, particularly in relation to the residential zoning for R2 and R3. So now that growth containment boundary includes all residential properties that are zoned R2 and R3. Moving now into the land use designations. one key change that we've made is in electoral area A, just on the outskirts of Mill Bay Village and the surrounding area around Stonebridge. So in the past, some of these properties were designated large lot suburban, and again, to match with some of the underlying zoning, we have redesignated some of those properties to medium lot suburban, so that slightly darker kind of beige color surrounding the village. Where you see essentially a bit of a tighter set of development patterns, so smaller properties. Again, those align much better with that medium lot suburban of 15 units per hectare. And so I felt like it was a good way to kind of match the designation to the existing zoning. You'll also notice a new special study area in the Mill Bay Village area for comprehensive development. It now spans in the central part of the village here. It now spans across the Trans-Canada Highway to a few other properties. Just given some of the challenges in relation to servicing and the need to ensure that any kind of development that occurs here works in collaboration with other property owners to secure servicing for water, as an example, in this area, given the water constraints in Mill Bay Village. There have been a few other changes in terms of the land use designations in relation to the Stonebridge Comprehensive Development Plan. So in particular, a couple properties just on the edge close to the Trans-Canada Highway have been converted now to village commercial, which again aligns with the underlying zoning that was given or has been approved for the Stonebridge Comprehensive Development. So again, the purpose of this is really to align with some of the existing zoning entitlements in the area. Another key change in Schedule L in relation to land use designations is is essentially a policy change within the special study area for Wake Lake in electoral area E. So in this case, the special study area would look to incentivize the restoration and protection of parcels that were once that are zoned for forestry. So you can see the properties that are hatched in green there, just around the southwestern corner of Wake Lake. The idea would be that if the property owners were to redevelop these lands, they would have access to a potential density bonus program that would credit a certain amount of additional density in exchange for restored and dedicated habitat. The goal would be to essentially connect the Wake Lake area to the Couch and River watershed and in terms of its natural habitat areas, and it would require as well a qualified environmental professional to assess and sign off on those restoration efforts. To give you a sense of why we would like to do something of this nature, again, it's about connecting wildlife habitat, ensuring the protection of the Wake Lake toad. But a typical subdivision would see many properties kind of extend all the way out to that primary conservation area, so that you see on the left there. Whereas if we are able to incentivize restoration and conservation of some of these lands in exchange for a couple more properties or a bit more density, what we can achieve is the protection of more lands through those properties. So the idea would be that those properties would essentially be clustered in a smaller part of the parcel, and more land would be dedicated and protected for its natural habitat. Another change to the land use designations, again, impacts electoral area G. So within that new growth containment boundary that I was showing earlier, all residential properties, except for one, which I believe is a mobile park just in the north here, would be designated country suburban with a density of about 2.5 units per hectare. So again, matching some of the existing zoning entitlements within here and the ability for some of these properties to see a little bit of subdivision, much to the same pattern that has occurred in the past in Altair. So not a big change, but certainly one that that again aligns with some of the underlying zoning and matches that expectation of property owners in the area. So with that, I really wanted to present some of those major key changes that we've seen over the course of the last few months since we've last been at the director's table, and I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Do people have any questions? I know that we're going to be dealing with this at R1, so do you have any questions right now for Patrick? Director Morrison does, yes.
Thank you, Patrick, and thanks for the specificity on the Wake Lake special study area. More of a stepping back and a general question, just so that the community is clear on special study areas. I know that there's been some comment in my community about there being expanded special study areas, but can you give us, just from your perspective, what a timeline would be for the official community plan and what some of the criteria would be for us to include a special study area? And I think you know the area that I'm talking about, the Cowichan Lake shoreline, but any comments on the general application of special study areas?
So there's first, to answer the question around the timeline of an OCP, so they do need to be reviewed legislatively. There's a legislative requirement to review an OCP every 5 or 10 years. Oftentimes, communities don't manage to review them every 5 years, but we see them also being reviewed mostly around 5 to 10 years. But tend to have a horizon or a vision looking out about 20 years in timeline. And so what these special study areas would have in terms of intention is that anything that could potentially happen in terms of large comprehensive developments over large properties that we anticipate perhaps coming in would be subject to some of these policies that we've identified. So, for instance, there's 3 different types of special study areas that we have detailed in the OCP. One is for infrastructure and servicing. So these are areas that are particularly outside of the growth containment boundaries, but that are facing servicing challenges. So for instance, there's South Shawnigan Lake, which is nearly entirely developed all the way along the edge of the lake, and there are concerns around wastewater and its infiltration into the lake. There's also a special study area for comprehensive development, which again is in relation to large parcels where we would really want to see a comprehensive kind of study to explore certain things like servicing, transportation networks, parks and trails, and the siting of buildings and other aspects before any kind of application comes in, so that we have a better understanding of what the overall picture of the development would look like before entering any kind of OCP amendment or rezoning application process. The final type of special study area is around new parks and open spaces. And so in this case, we're looking at identifying certain places where if a development application would come through, the CVRD would be interested in receiving or having dedicated certain green spaces to enhance parks, trails, or other types of green space, perhaps for environmental protection needs or recreational needs. So there's 3 of those in the OCP, and so I suppose in consideration of Cowichan Lake, I certainly know that in contrast to Shawnigan Lake, not the whole entire lake is surrounded by development. It does have quite a few properties that are, primarily owned by either the Crown or by private managed forest lands. And so we don't believe at this time that it is as perhaps necessary as Shawnigan Lake to look at servicing implications in that area.
Thank you.
Maybe just to follow up on that. So I appreciate your example about Wake Lake, and I guess that's the third type of study area. I think when I look at the diagram, I go, oh, this looks great. Can you point me to any examples of where this has happened successfully in a rural area? Seems to me that with our Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure constraints, it's challenging for this to ever work. Would that be correct?
I think part of the challenge is that we'll often see in official community plans statements, policy statements that say that we would prefer or encourage cluster development over typical subdivisions, but we don't typically apply as well a potential incentive to make it happen. So in this case, the key here is that there would be an incentive in the form of density. So, for instance, in the example given in the OCP, it would be a 45-hectare parcel of land would typically produce 9 units, and if a large block of that 45 hectares piece of land is then protected, restored, and dedicated to the CVRD, that would lead to approximately 13 units. So the incentive is there, and that would encourage more of it from happening. But typically, if it's just a policy statement encouraging cluster development, but there's nothing to incentivize or create that that ability, make it attractive for potential developers or property owners, it's much more difficult to make it happen. But we do see it. There are examples even in the Cowichan Valley where there have been large dedications of natural lands and sort of smaller clustered development. And so it certainly is possible, and it does happen from time to time.
Thank you. Any other questions for Patrick? All right, thank you very much. Let's move on.
Great, thank you, Chair. We're on C1, Grant and Aid Request, Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, regarding Cowichan missing and murdered women, men, and Children's Society. That it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid from Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the Cowichan Missing and Murdered Women, Men, and Children's Society to support the fundraising gala, Lifting Spirits, Honoring Lives.
Do I have someone to move it and second it? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. C2, Grant and Aid Request, Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, regarding Sunridge Waldorf Parent Association. That it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid from Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the Sunrise Waldorf Parent Association to assist in the contribution towards a playground structure for the school.
I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. Those will go to November 8th board. Next item is 7, information. It's Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Community Parks Advisory Commission minutes, September 26, 2023, for information.
Any comments, questions? Nope. Let's move on.
Moving on to reports of R1, report from the Planning Strategic Initiatives Division regarding the OCP for electoral areas schedules G and L updated. This recommendation is for information.
Ms. Breen is here. If anyone has further questions related to Patrick's presentation. Anyone? Director Segal?
Thank
And
you.
Patrick's online too.
Sorry, what was that, Ms. Breen?
Patrick's online as well. He stayed online.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is through to Ms. Breen. Just the special study area that got renamed to the benchlands in Area A. I'm just wondering if I can get a quick, how did that come to be? Was this previously directed by the board, or, what's the little history there?
Well, so to the director through the chair, in the community circle process, we did receive submissions from the communities. So maybe 125 different workbooks were submitted. And not just in electoral area A, but other electoral areas. We did have suggestions to look at special areas, study areas. In this particular case, we did have a submission for us to look at this. It's called Benchlands, and whether or not this was something that we thought could be achievable over the long term. We did talk, we did consider it, then we did have internal considerations with servicing, engineering, and also with Malhat. So before this was brought in as a draft, there were several consultations that happened, but the initiation of it came from the community.
Any other questions? Director Abbott?
Thank you, Chair. Through to Ms. Breen. It's pretty minor, but in analysis in the report, what does fabric alignment refer to?
Thank you to Director Abbott through the chair. The GIS fabric alignment in the CVRD has undergone its own modernization in this process, and the layers between zoning and designations, the parcel layers haven't all been aligned, so to speak. And in the process of this, there's been a lot of work as they've been moving through it to ensure that when you pull up the mapping on our GIS layers, that the OCP and the zoning and the parcel lines are all aligned together. So we call that the fabric.
Thank you.
All right, well, that was just for information, so if no one has any more questions, we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. R2, report from the Development Services Division regarding application number SC23D03 5301 Chester Road, PID 028237765. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that application number SC23D01 5301 Chester Road, PID 028237765 be phased strata plan EPS 1665 be approved. And
Welcome, Mr. Buchan.
If we could advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a strata title conversion application for the property located at 5301 Chester Road. The purpose of this application is to request that the board approve a strata title for the existing 5-unit building. And next slide, please. The maps on screen show the subject property as well as its general location. The subject property was rezoned in 2010 to permit a mixed industrial and commercial development. Next slide, please. New buildings that are unoccupied by residential or commercial tenants or owners can typically be strata titled without board approvals. However, when a building has been previously occupied, board approvals are required. For this development, the board has not received strata title conversion applications in the past because previous buildings have not been occupied. However, the building in question was occupied before the strata plan could be registered, so board approvals are needed. And if we could go back one slide. Oh, I'm missing one, that's okay. Let's go to the recommendation. So the Strata Property Act provides some guidance to assist local governments when considering the conversion of previously occupied buildings. These items are summarized in the staff report and largely focus on older residential buildings. Since the subject property is a relatively new building and is not residential, the staff recommendation is to approve the application. I'm here for questions, and I believe the agent is online.
Great. Mr. Robson, are you there?
I am indeed. Hello.
Hello. Would you like to add anything?
I think the staff report was more comprehensive than my own submissions, so I don't really have much to add to it. This was an unfortunate circumstance. Delays in registration of the Land Title Office are the reason that this is before the board at all, and I'm hopeful that it can be approved.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions, Director Abbott?
I was going to make the motion to approve.
Any questions first? No? Okay, yes. A motion to approve and a seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. That was easy.
thank you. Moving on, R3, report from the Development Services Division regarding application RZ23A03 Stonebridge, that it be recommended to the board that application RZ23A03 Stonebridge be referred to external agencies as outlined in the staff report to October 18th, 2023 Electoral Area Services Committee meeting.
Welcome, Mr. Buchan. I think this will probably be more complicated.
Thank you. So this is an application to consolidate and update zoning for the Stonebridge lands in Mill Bay, as well as several adjacent parcels. The agent proposes to combine the 8 existing zones and create one comprehensive development zone with 5 sub-areas. The application includes amendments to the OCP to redesignate some of the lands to commercial in the OCP and to Stonebridge Comprehensive in the local area plan. This application also includes the update and consolidation of community amenities, some of which are presently captured in covenants and others are captured in zoning. On to the next slide, please. On screen is a map of the existing zoned areas. This includes both the Stonebridge Assembly and several adjacent lands. The key elements of the proposed zone would include zoning regulations that would allow for multifamily units to be spread out throughout the subdivision, a reduction in parcel size for single-family, duplex, and congregate care lots, an expansion in areas where multifamilies can be constructed, a reduction in minimum lot sizes and widths for secondary suites, a reduction in minimum parcel line setbacks, permitting drive-through uses in some of the commercial areas, and an option for workforce housing within Area 4. Next slide, please. On screen is a detailed map of the existing OCP designations. The bulk of the lands, as you can see, are designated residential. A breakdown of this, of each parcel is provided in attachment B of the report. And on to the next slide. This map shows the proposed zone areas. And if we could advance the transition, the areas in red show where there's proposed OCP amendments to bring them from residential to commercial uses. As we saw earlier on R1, Area 4 is already presently considered to be going through this change with the modernized official community plan. This staff report highlights some additional information that may be requested as this application advances. That list will be further refined following external agency feedback and will be addressed through a subsequent report through the ESE. The board is being asked to consider referral to external agencies prior to advancing amendment bylaws. That feedback will be addressed through a subsequent report and it would come to this committee. Next slide. Oh, we're at the recommendation, never mind. Staff recommendation is that this be referred out to the agencies detailed in the staff reports. And I'm here for questions. The agent is also in the audience.
Right. Welcome. Would you like to add anything?
Good afternoon. For those that I've never met, my name is Wayne Hopkins. I'm one of the new owners of the Stonebridge lands. I've joined the previous owners, the existing owners, who've owned this property for quite some time. My company is Meriden Group. I've worked in CVRD since 2007 on a project in Area I that's been going on and on and on. The lands, as Richard mentioned, or Mr. Buchan mentioned, has been already zoned from 2013 and 2016. Just a quick moment of how we got here today. When I became involved just under a year ago, one of the first things I did was start to evaluate the zoning that was there. And I found some oddities in the zoning where you have zoning lines going through parcels, which is really unusual. But more than that, we found some errors in the zoning. So I met with senior staff to go over this with the intention of repairing the zones. And then we started looking at how complex the zones were, having, I think it's 5 zones in this one project. And we talked about trying to consolidate the zones, fix the errors, simplify them basically for the administration in the long term. That's where we are today. Just a few quick comments. When we started to consolidate, I actually created a simple little spreadsheet that compared the 5 zones, and then we tried to extrapolate across some consistency with the existing zones into the new consolidated zone. There were a few areas we've also tweaked in addition, which was lot size. We lowered one exterior side yard by 1/2 meter, and we suggested an alteration of the height. All the other uses, all the other aspects are continuations of the existing zones. There are no new uses proposed. There's no practical change in density. I know I view it more simplistic than maybe you do. I look at it as a housekeeping issue, just trying to basically I'm trying to clean the house before the dinner party starts. We intend on turning dirt in March. We're working rapidly to make this happen. So we're trying to get everything ready for that moment. The project has been identified by the province as a high-priority residential product. We've been taken into the new provincial permitting task force for housing supply. That's great because it really helps get the provincial approvals done quickly, sometimes way quicker than I expected, and now I feel like I'm chasing the province half the time. Other way around, so they're chasing me because they're moving so quickly with the applications. Some of the other advantages to what we're doing is, of course, simplification of the zone by combining the zones, making them simple, having consistency, and with the minimums and maximums within the zones across all the areas, makes it simple for both ourselves and the staff in the long term as the project unfolds. The project will be a 10-year at best, 15 years, hopefully no longer, over a course of 7 to 9 phases. So there's a lot of work to be done over the next 15 years. And as we know, looking back over the last 5 and the last 10, housing needs shift, housing priorities shift. Having the consolidated zone that's simplified will let us, and indirectly CVRD, help us move and address the changes and the needs as they occur. The one aspect that I like about what we're also accomplishing, and much of it's already in the existing zones, but with these little tweaks, we're actually able to expand the housing spectrum that's going to be available at the site. It's not too often that you find a project that can hit so many different socioeconomic levels in relation to housing. Usually it's a one and done. You might get a large lot subdivision, all the homes are going for 1.3 to 1.5 million. It's not too often that you can get a project that has such a large ability to provide housing over the entire spectrum. I sat down last night trying to figure out exactly how large our spectrum of housing can be under the existing zoning and even more so under the consolidated zone. And just to give you an example, we have cluster single family, small lot single family without suite, single family with suites, duplex, townhouse, row house, multiplex, affordable rental, affordable seniors, affordable for families, market rental, hopefully workforce short-term, seniors with an aging in place kind of concept from subsidized rental for seniors all the way through to higher levels of care, and of course also the market housing. The one aspect of combining all the uses within different areas also gives us the ability to intertwine the uses. All too often you get one type of housing, one type of housing, one type of housing, almost segregates by socioeconomic lines. What you're seeing in a lot of large communities in North America, one really good example in Portland, I can't believe I'm going to compliment Calgary on their development, but Calgary's doing a really good job with it as well, is you go down streets in new communities, you see single family, you see duplex, you turn the corner and there's 4 or 5 townhouses. And when you're walking down the streets, you have to really focus to notice a difference in the tenure of housing. It's really difficult. They've really brought them together in a way that really works in a community. We hope to have some of that at Stonebridge. The master plan is being redone, and I understand this phase of the process is very vague and very large encompassing. Next time we see you, we should have a updated master plan that meets today's needs and gives you a little more understanding of the scope. The old master plan I was going to bring, but I think it would have created way more questions than I would have had answers for. But it is important. We have confirmed one aspect of the master plan. So 2024 will see phase 1 of Stonebridge go ahead. Working with the province, we've now confirmed where the first phase will be and the housing that will be within it. And it will include the seniors housing, congregate care. It will include 3 multifamily buildings, to which we're hoping that we're trying to draw BC Housing up into the region to provide affordable seniors and an affordable individual family. We're talking with rental providers who build rental buildings, trying to pull them up here as well to provide market rental. And then there will be probably around 30 lots that will be single-family and/or duplex as well. And that'll be phase one, along with the redevelopment of the commercial area formerly known as Pioneer Square. So that's the first phase that will go ahead, and that's the one we're trying to get to in March. I've got a lot of notes. I could go on forever. I get kind of excited. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. So do people have questions for either Mr. Buchan or Mr. Hopkins? Director Abbott, do you have a question?
May I?
Okay,
Chair?
go.
Mr. Hopkins, sounds exciting, especially you seem enthusiastic, and I may be very premature in asking this question. You can just say I'm premature. But as I read, I thought 550 units, perhaps a car and a half per unit. So we're up to about 750 more vehicles out as it's built out. Just wondering, as it gets referred to Modi, can you crystal ball what's going to happen as far as egress access to the highway? It's quite consolidated in that neck of the woods.
You're not premature. That's been one of the things we've been focusing on in the last few months. Access and egress, of course, is important not only for new residents to the project and the commercial entities, but also the existing. I don't have a lot of answers for you. We have re-engaged Watt Engineering, who does a lot of the traffic design for the province, as well as McElhaney, who does a lot of the design for the province. And as part of the permitting task force, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure has been very responsive. We've been focusing our efforts right now on two parts of the traffic management. First, getting traffic away from Barrie Road, what I call Barrie Road South, which is on the south side of the Stone Bridge. Because that intersection with Duluth and the highway is just, I can't even describe it. I'm probably getting taped. That portion of the project will be a long time before it's developed. We're focusing on the Shawnigan Mill Bay Road and the highway intersection with Shawnigan Mill Bay Road. We know what we want to see for the improvements in relation to left-hand and dedicated and right. It's all being drafted out. Right now, it's just going to be going to the province probably in about a week with all the data we've collected and our suggestions for the realignment and repairs. The one good thing is the province recognizes that that intersection is already performing at a loss rate and it needs work. So everybody agrees something needs to happen. To what extent they'll let us happen, I think they're totally on board. They recognize that it needs to be done, and they're pushing for the housing and the economic benefit, so they know that they have to be a partner in those fixes.
Director Segal.
Yeah, I'll start. I think my questions are, thanks Wayne, mostly for Mr. Buchan. So I'll say that, my community has looked forward to this development for a very long time, and even just this weekend at the local area plan sessions, this specific property was mentioned, and seniors housing was requested, and affordable housing was requested. So this is definitely an exciting application, but it's huge, and I liked how Wayne put it. It's vague and big, and yeah, I found as I was reading it, I wanted that conceptual master plan. I wanted to know, like, renegotiated amenities. What is the new covenant going to look like? And so I guess my question is, how is this process supposed to work? Right now, I guess we're just making a decision on the specific zoning. But when I think of referring to external agencies, like, I would want my APC to have that full picture. So if you could comment on that, that would be great.
Certainly. So an Advisory Planning Commission, Advisory Parks Commission, and all the other agencies would be getting a copy of this report. And if there's any additional information that the board would like to see included in that referral, that could be requested. If this went to the APC today, it would be a high-level discussion of what things they want to see in that master plan. or the amenity covenant, and then that would come back to the board with a recommendation, and staff would act on those recommendations at the board's direction.
So, okay, if it went out with this report to my commissions and they gave some feedback and we got, you know, a new version and it had a lot of changes, like, can it go back again to the APC, or is this, are we getting into like redundant extra?
Typically, we don't refer back to the APC a second time, but all members are welcome to come out and participate at the public participation. That could be public hearing, future
Yeah.
EAC meetings, and if there's particular items such as the comprehensive subdivision plan, that's something the board could recommend be provided to the APC. And it sounds like the agent is working on getting that information to us, so that might work with their timelines, but they'd have to
Okay.
speak to that.
And I know he's waving his hand, trying to add something. I think I would, yeah, I noticed in the internal referral responses, like, I loved everything that staff brought forward. They're all like really, really valuable. And particularly under the parks one, it said, you know, for this to be referred to the parks with an amended covenant. So I guess, yeah, I would like for this to go to my APC and parks with some kind of conceptual master plan and at least an idea around like changes to amenities and the covenant.
Perfect.
Sure. We're still in question period.
Just for clarity, I was going to bring a lot of stuff today, but I was told that it was probably a little soon for the amount of detail that I could get into very easily. I could take up your whole afternoon. My goal is, before it gets to your APC and the Advisory Parks Commission, they will have the master plan, they'll have the revised covenant, they'll have the detail broken down in relation to what their priorities are, so they can understand what's currently approved and can occur, and maintaining that throughout what we're doing. There'll be more to them to see except for Richard's report.
Any other questions? All right, I'll ask Director Morrison.
Yeah, thanks. I think I've got a whole bunch of questions, and I think I'll limit them, but this is one of our first kick at the can type of applications, and I recognize by its very nature that there's not a lot of detail, but I've read an awful lot of big development reports in my time here, and I can't say I'm extremely excited about this one, and it could just be due to the lack of detail. I know that there's been quite a few lots that have been approved in my time here, and we're in the middle of a housing crisis, and we haven't seen a whole bunch of affordable properties built. So, you know, I'm looking at the very enabling language of the staff report and not seeing anything in the way of compelling language in the staff report. And that's troublesome because this development has the potential to change the core of Mill Bay. And something that big, you know, I would want all of the referral agencies that will be receiving this to have a heck of a lot clearer picture of what has been, or what's being proposed. And I hear the applicant say all the right things, you know, affordable housing, and like, I'd like to see cooperative housing organizations brought in and all of, I think that'd be great. But that's in the developer's rationale. It's not in the proposal here. So, you know, I can, and I don't want to stand in the way of housing being built, but I can tell you there's sort of the Ontario perspective on solving the housing crisis by build a whole bunch of whatever and it's going to, you know, ease the pressure. And yet I think we might be needing to look at a more targeted, affordable component. I think the term was that the applicant used is the hope to have a variety of ownership tenure. Hoping to have a variety of ownership tenure is one thing. I would like to see if there's a way for us to compel a variety of ownership tenure. So that's my question to staff, and whether it's Mr. Buchan or other staff. Are we able to, I know that the applicant wants to sort of tighten up the zoning and get some consistency. Is there some way that we can tighten up the language so that we can ensure that there will be a multiple of tenures available when this development is built out?
And thank you through the chair. There are a number of tools that staff could potentially use for that. Some of that could be within zoning itself. Some of that could be within covenants. The intent of this initial report is to see, do we want to move this forward to external agencies so that we can bring back a fulsome report with analysis and recommendations on moving forward.
Yes, please.
So I get the intent of the report. Is there a way that when this package is sent out, that the, specifically the advisory planning commissions, are made aware of the fact that this committee has concerns about variety of tenure, the percentages of affordable and attainable housing, embedded targets for housing types within the development. I think that's important, that not only are we considering it, but the people that we're referring this to is aware that we're considering it.
And through the chair, yes, this is something we can communicate to the agencies, to the committees. This is also something that the applicant is hearing and may be able to provide some more information to those committees and commissions.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I got hung up on the lot size issue. So it seems to me that we're talking a lot about not increasing the density. The density will stay the same, and primarily because of water issues. And I think that we should definitely make sure that all the things that we can do to make our buildings water efficient and recycle water and collect water and all that kind of thing happen as part of our building requirements. But it seems like if you have all the same density but a lot smaller lots, what happens to all the land that then won't be used?
Certainly. So that might be that some lots have to be larger. That might be more for parks. The developer may have some answers to those questions as well. From what we understand, the intent is not to make them all small lots, but to provide a mix.
Right.
And
I
as
get
we
that.
said, we can also look at a ratio in zoning if that's desired.
Okay, but we should be thinking about capping density, right?
That's certainly one of the options. A cap is an option. Other options would look at density bonusing, but these are things that we'll be bringing back further analysis on in the next report.
So my biggest concern, as everyone always knows, is water and the long-term sustainability of our water supply. And I'm not sure how understanding water is more of an art than a science, as people always like to tell me. But that being said, one should take a really cautious approach in this day and age. So, yeah, I think it's really important that we look at that aspect of it moving forward. So, I'll turn to anyone, any more questions? Director of the area, what would you like to do?
Yeah, I'd like to see this move forward with, now that, all of our collective comments have been heard. So I'll move the motion to refer to external agencies. Can I speak to it?
Yes, please. Well, you've got a seconder. Yep, go ahead.
I guess this is just to add for Mr. Buchan. I loved all of your additional information pieces that we may want to consider. Yes, to all of them. And then just a note within the zoning, for the commercial piece, medical clinics are there. Can that also include like urgent primary care? Like, are we limited to just a little doctor's office, or?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer offhand, but I can certainly bring some details on that in the next report.
Great, just wanted to share that we would love something like that in Mill Bay. Thank you.
All right. Any discussion? I'll call the question then. All in favor? Anyone opposed? The motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're moving to R4, report from the...
Hang on.
Sorry?
Before we move forward, can we just take a break? 10 minutes, 22. Sorry. All right, the tape's rolling again, so we can get started. Welcome, Ms. Dubina.
Thank you, Chair.
We're doing R4, right?
Yeah, R4. Okay.
Do you have a presentation? Yep, here it
Yeah.
comes. Here it comes.
So this application proposes to rezone 2 hectares of the subject property from F1 primary forestry to R2 suburban residential. Just put it on the next slide, please. Just highlighted the area. So the proposed rezoning would facilitate a 3-lot subdivision to create 2 1-hectare residential parcels shown in yellow and orange, and a 31.5 hectare remainder parcel that would retain the F1 zoning. Since the minimum parcel size in the F1 zone is 80 hectares in the zoning bylaw, the remainder parcel will also require a site-specific rezoning, as the proposed subdivision would create an undersized parcel in that zone. Servicing is proposed to be on-site with wells and septic systems. The proposal is inconsistent with the renewable resource forestry land use designation and OCP policies that are intended to preserve resource land, including forestry lands, by retaining large parcel sizes and limiting residential development. Should this application proceed, an OCP amendment is required to redesignate the parcel to enable the proposed rezoning. Staff are recommending the application be denied. Next slide, please. As it is inconsistent with OCP policies that direct residential development within growth containment boundaries and that do not support subdivision within rural areas. And an alternative recommendation is provided in the staff report. And the applicant is here.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to add anything? Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Lister?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and committee members. My name is Ted Lister. I am the president of Samoa Holdings Limited, the owners of the property. The staff report offers reasons for denying our application, but I'd like to speak to the positives of it going forward. What we are proposing is what now surrounds us on 3 sides. Smaller rural acreages, 2.5 to 10 acre plus. 2.5 acres or 1 hectare are the minimum size for both septic and well. The dream of many Canadians to own some space and privacy for their own enjoyment. It is hard to turn on a radio, a TV, or pick up a newspaper today without having Canada's, BC's, or the islands' housing shortage come up front and center. CMHC predicts we have a shortage of 4 million houses, and 2/3 of that are in Ontario and BC. The solution to the shortage is like eating an elephant, 1 spoonful at a time. One might look at this application and say, Well, it's only 2 units. R2 zoning allows for a single-family home with a suite or a small secondary residence. Now we're up to 4. These lots will appeal to a move-up buyer who may live in a single-family home, which would provide 2 more. If that lot is, or if that single-family house is on a large urban lot, it could be primed for redevelopment or land assembly and become a multifamily project, an endless possibility there. The report also concerns about potable water supply. The existing well on the property, which I witched, provides no shortage of drinking water. In fact, after planting 250 fir seedlings this year, which required 2 hours of hand watering every second day, there was no interruption in the flow. The future lots show the same excellent potential. If one thinks about it, most domestic water goes right back into the ground. Highest and best used. We chose this area for subdivision as we believe it is better suited for residential use and forestry. 94% of the property remains in F1, consistent with the OCP, and it continues to be regulated and inspected by Managed Forest Council. In fact, we were inspected this summer and passed with no deficiencies. With the Managed Forest Council, we have made a commitment to grow trees for 15 years. It is just as important to create housing opportunities for move-up buyers as it is for the first-time buyer. I'm happy to answer all and any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for either Ms. Bina or Mr. Lister? Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. One would be an observation that we're being counseled by staff to, as you may have sat through, concentrate our growth in a growth containment boundary and to move away from areas that aren't in the growth containment boundary, which this seems to suggest that purely contrary. You also raised the specter of what's happened next door or your neighboring property. And as I look at the drawing that Ms. W. just put up, it becomes quite, that same logic could be applied in about 15 years' time, that we should slowly start to see more subdivisions or more of the property being subdivided. So a 15-year covenant or moratorium on any future subdivision because of the trees isn't a very long window. I guess I'm concerned that this is just the thin edge of the wedge. It's not really a question, but an observation.
One thing about the property, it has a lot of water on it, which would restrict a lot of the development area. And I've been in the development business since 1980, and, you know, we didn't buy it to do a big project.
Any other questions? All right, turn to the director of the area. Alternate director of the area.
Can I just read? Sierra has asked or requested that she be able to submit change requests after the meeting. She wants to watch the recording and get back to the team with questions. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then.
Director Morrison.
Move the staff recommendation.
And it's been seconded. We have a motion on the floor now. Who would like to speak to the motion to recommend denial? Director Morrison.
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunate that the director for the area can't be here, but just didn't appreciate the applicant's comments, but you know, it's pretty clear that we are, as decision makers, being asked to shift the focus of the growth patterns of our communities. We're all engaged in the local area plan process and the likes, and it's not only about the remarks that about inventory and bringing new lots on. There's knock-on effects as to, you know, are properties in that area able to get insurance? Are they able to get fire protection? You know, there's the lack of transit. There's any number of things, but the counsel that we're getting, not only from our own staff, but even from the province and from Union of BC municipalities, is that we have to look at where our growth is going to take place, and our growth has got to take place near our services. And you know, my own electoral area will have numerous opportunities if we were to endorse this type of thing. I will have people knock, or we will all have people knocking at the door and making application for this and similar applications, and we have to change our thinking, and we have to, you know, I think, adhere to the professional advice that we're getting, and that's why I moved the recommendation, and that's why I will support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything more to add? Director Martin.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what the director of the area in her absence and her ask through the cell device is about listening to this communication and going back to staff and saying, you know, what could be done. So I'd like to make a motion to refer back to staff for the next meeting.
Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder on the propriety of a referral. Director Morrison.
Well, I think I don't think the referral is in order, because we have that benefit and privilege of having an alternate director here. And it's the alternate director's wishes of you know, carrying on the business and conducting in the director's stead. And it's, I think, not, maybe improper to move items that are from our area when we have a representative sitting here to refer off so that the director who isn't in attendance is able to participate. So, you know, we have a representative in the room, and I think we should be contemplating the report as it's presented to us.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Director McClinton.
Through the chair, thank you. To the referral, keep me in line here. I know it's tough to stay on track, but I think I would very much like to hear the director of the area's comments. You know, there was comments made about future applications we may get, those sorts of things. I mean, that's our job, to listen to all of these on their own merit. You know, yes, and so I do think it would be important if there's maybe something, an alternative to what's being proposed. I'd certainly, you know, be open to hearing about it.
Anyone else like to discuss this? Referral motion? I'll call the question. Oh, thank you. Anne, Ms. Cheryl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just for the committee's benefit, the next meeting of the board is not until November the 8th, and there will be another EASD meeting on November 1st. So if you simply wish to defer the decision until November 1st, I think that would be fine. If you refer back to staff, this application would probably not come back to the committee until later in November, so it will, I think, unnecessarily delay the process. And the other comment that I wish to make is that staff won't have an independent negotiation with the electoral area director about the application, because it's in stream, and discussion about the application should occur at committee so that all electoral area directors get the benefit of the same information.
Alrighty, so The corporate secretary has just told me that we could defeat the referral motion and table it to the next meeting, if that's what you would desire to do. So I'm going to call the question on the referral motion. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Everyone's opposed. The motion's defeated. So now, would someone like to move to table it to the next meeting? And that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on tabling? Do we discuss tabling?
Explanation as to why to table? Defer, because the director's not here?
Apparently.
My understanding is we have a representative at the table, so I don't know that a deferral to another meeting is in order.
Thank you. I think that point's been made. So does anyone have anything more to add to that? Otherwise, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of tabling the motion or deferring it, whatever you want to call it, to the next Electoral Area Services Committee meeting for us to pick up the discussion at that time? Or go back to the original motion that's on the floor, which is to deny? So are you clear? Everyone clear?
So the one we're voting on now is?
To table. Yep. All in favor of tabling? Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people are opposed. So that we'll go back to the main motion. I'm going to call, any more discussion on the main motion? And please read the main motion.
Thank you. That it be recommended to the board that the application number RZ23B013068 Renfrew Road, PID 006410065 be denied.
Before I call the, pardon me? It was moved and seconded. Before I call the, I'm going to add my 2 cents worth. This is the Cook Isla watershed, and it absolutely doesn't make any sense to me to continue to put people out in high wildfire risk areas where we're continuing to compromise our water supply for the river, because all the groundwater is connected to the river in that area, and so it's really important that we think about that before we develop in these rural areas. Anyone want to add anything more? I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? The motion's carried.
Thank you. R5, a report from the Inspection and Enforcement Division regarding CVRD building regulation bylaw number 4433-2023, that it be recommended to the board that CVRD bylaw number 4433 building regulation bylaw 2023 be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption, and the second motion to that is that the staff draft amendments to the CVRD bylaw 3209 ticket information authorization bylaw 2008 for board consideration following adoption of CVRD bylaw number 4433 building regulation bylaw 2023.
Welcome, Mr. Brisky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sonny Brisky, Chief Building Official. Very excited about this, and I'm available to answer any questions you have.
Well, do we have any questions? Director Martman.
So you know my theme has been, so how does this impact farm buildings? And I was looking and comparing the 2 documents, and I'm not clear on how this will impact farmers that want to build a barn. So could you help me understand what the new proposed bylaw says about that?
Certainly, through the chair to you, Director Martman. Farm buildings is a little bit of a rabbit hole. There are a number of different classes of farm buildings based on their size and their use and whether they're of low human occupancy or high human occupancy. Farming is something that is quickly evolving in the provinces and becoming a lot more, there's a lot more automation and technology and things like that being used in farm buildings. So we've provided an exemption, which is in line with a lot of our neighbors, for landowners who are classed as farm through the Assessment Act if they wish to build a farm building under 600 square meters in size, then they may just proceed and do so under the Farm Code of Canada without any permit through us. If someone would like to build a farm building of other than low human occupancy or in excess of 600 square meters in size, we're going to regulate it. We're not going to regulate it in the respect of, you know, like how we would maybe treat a house or a commercial building or anything like that. But previously, we've been issuing siting permits to farmers and landowners with agricultural properties and things like that. And through discussions that I've had with representatives from the Public Safety and Ministry of Housing, that's not really an appropriate thing for us to be doing, and it could really actually create some liability for the district. So we do have a fee for farm buildings that is affordable, but for someone like yourself or other folks in Yellow Point or something like that that wanted to build a farm building, they're still going to be permitted to do so, but they may qualify for an exemption. If they don't, they're really just going to get a couple more inspections just so that we can ensure safety and adequate construction.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Can you clarify if that 600 square meters, so I think that's about 6,000 square feet, is that correct?
Somewhere in and around there, it
Yeah.
might be like 5,800 and something.
Yeah.
Essentially, what the province has communicated to me and what's coming in future editions of the building code is we're still riding the National Farm Code of Canada from 1995. That's the current edition of the Farm Code. I was 7 years old. But basically, the National Farm Code is going to be abolished, and it's going to be worked in as a new class of occupancy along with all the other types of buildings that we manage. So there's going to be some correctness there, but essentially what the province has told us is if someone is building a farm building in excess of 600 square meters, then the correct interpretation of the code is that landowner meets the Farm Code of Canada and the BC Building Code simultaneously. So when you build a building in excess of 600 square meters, that's what's known as a Part 3 building, and there are very much enhanced requirements around structural stability and fire protection and things like that.
Sorry, I have to sort of feel like I'm hogging the thing. That's a farmer joke, hog. So I think Appendix A of the National Farm Code talks about the 600 meters squared as being one of potential 3 stories. Is that still permitted then? 3 stories of that footprint?
That's correct. Through the chair to you, Director Martman, there are 3 triggers for a building to become a Part 3 building, and that would be to be in excess of 600 square meters, in excess of 3 stories. And the code defines what stories is for us. It's not how one would examine it through a zoning bylaw. And the third would be as if there was of some sort of hazardous use or something like that, which may be present in some farm buildings. You know, I could think of maybe some distilleries or cannabis production or something like that occurring in quote-unquote farm buildings, and something like that would drive that building into that category as well.
Director Morrison.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you too, Mr. Brisky. So this is a really interesting report, and there's a bit in here that I'm kind of missing, because in the past we've had our building inspection fees brought before us with comparators to other jurisdictions. You've made note in here that we're within, I think I saw 10% of our neighboring. Is there capacity, are we able to actually have a discussion about what exactly our fees are in comparison to our neighbors, maybe what targeted fees we would like to be set at? Because you know, we're just on the basis of what your next reports will be bringing us as far as the number of kilometers and inspections you do, Maybe we want to set our building inspection fees a little higher. That's a general question. You don't have to answer that one, but I do have something specific around the free service that we've been providing, and it falls under the fees, but with the inquiries from realtors, and I think I might have seen the word frivolous in here, and the suggestion that we go to a $25 per release of information. I did the math, and that's how you got to the $10,000 in revenue, and I think we should all be concerned about the revenue side. Is there any rationale why there wouldn't be a $50 per release of information? If we have staff that are running down inquiries, and according to the report, some of them are kind of frivolous, shouldn't there be a corresponding charge that would not only, cover the cost of the real ones, but even some of the frivolous ones? I'll stop there.
Thank you, Director Morrison. I guess I'll answer the second question first, and then I might have to ask you to repeat some of the first question. But this has been of great debate on the first floor, this fee, and we do have staff that are responsible for, undertaking those requests and delivering the information, and we landed on $25 as being appropriate. It can certainly be something that can be changed or amended, but the time that's spent and the amount of information that is delivered, it was sort of, and in speaking with some of the other regional districts, that was a number that seemed appropriate.
So if I just follow up, to rephrase the first question, can we have the actual building inspection and permit fees brought to us for consideration in comparison to the other jurisdictions neighboring us?
That's absolutely something that we can do. A lot of jurisdictions don't all apply fees in the same respect. Some fees are delivered by the square footage of the home, some fees are delivered by the estimated cost of the construction, but if that is the direction the committee's giving, that's certainly something that we can, information that we can deliver to you.
Director McClinton.
Through the chair, thank you. Will there be a fee for Director Morrison of $25 to get the? I'm actually in full agreement. I mean, $50. Just maybe, is there any, two-part question, what's the average amount of time spent on pulling the information? And is there any, I don't want to call them super offenders, but repeat, is there certain people that are pulling information all the time compared to others?
Through the chair to you, Director McClinton. So every file is unique, but typically it is the same information that is released that we are permitted to release under the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection Act. Anything beyond that is, sent to FOI. It's not a ton of documents, record of permits issued, maybe a survey, something like that the realtor would be useful for them if we have it, septic information. On average, I would say maybe it only takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes to pull it together. Our admin team is very busy, and sometimes, they might be pulled in a few different directions and might take them a little bit longer to get something done. But I guess the comment that I was trying to make in the feedback that we're getting from the staff that do provide this information is that a listing realtor would request the documents, and then we would have the realtor for maybe 4 or 5 prospective buyers also requesting that same information, right? So we've been finding ourselves having to, do the same work redundantly, and our hope is that if we charge a $25 fee and the listing realtor has the information, that will, put an end to redundant and frequent requests for the same information.
Any more questions? Ms. Cheryl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Should the committee wish to proceed with recommendation to advance the bylaw to the board, staff would welcome a second resolution requesting that further information come back to committee about the realtor packages that we prepare, the time that it takes to prepare those, and further discussion about building permit fees. We are anticipating bringing a report forward on development fees, so it might be worthwhile to have a discussion about building permit fees at the same time. But I wanted to offer that as an option to you.
You'd like direction if we want to do this.
Well, if I could, Madam Chair, through to Ms. Churl, I don't see any issue with forwarding the staff recommendation at this point. Do you want a subsequent resolution asking for the permit fees and realtor package information to come forward at when the other report is coming forward on the development services fees?
Yes, please.
Would you like to make that? Well, let's deal with this first one. Yeah. So we've moved and seconded. Any more discussion on the recommendation? Would you like to read the recommendation?
I can read it again. That it be recommended to the board that CVRD bylaw number 4433, Building Regulation Bylaw 2023, be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption. And 2, that staff be draft amendments to the CVRD bylaw number 3209, Ticket Information Authorization Bylaw 2008 for board consideration following adoption of CVRD bylaw number 4433, Building Regulation Bylaw 2023.
Any more discussion? Call a question? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Director Morrison.
I haven't written it out, but the staff be directed to provide building permit fee comparisons and realtor package information for presentation at the development fee report meeting.
Perfect. And I have a seconder. Any discussion? Yes, please.
To the chair, thank you. Yeah, just one follow-up, like, I just would agree again with Director Morrison's point. I think $25 is light. I know we hear often that we're understaffed, whatever it might be. We're busy, and I think to help manage that, I mean, especially as we're, looking at a budget, austerity budget, I think it makes a lot of sense to try to either increase revenue or free up the time of our staff for all the important work. So just my thoughts on that, and look forward to the report.
Great. I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. All right.
Moving to R6, report from the Inspection Enforcement Division regarding Building Inspection 2023, third quarter report. This is for information.
Any
comments?
Yeah, any questions?
Any questions for, this is about building inspections. No, I think we're good. Everyone understands.
Thank you. Moving to R7, report from...
Thank you.
Oops, sorry.
Mr. Brisky, sorry.
The next one, too. Report from the Building Inspection Enforcement Division regarding bylaw enforcement 2023, second and third quarter report for information.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Rob Harris, Manager of Bylaw Enforcement. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Directors. My name is Rob Harris, Bylaw Enforcement Manager, and I'm here for questions as well.
Any questions? I had a question, but I have to think about it. I have to try and remember it. Hang on. I thought I'd have a bit more time here. Well, first of all, did we have any problems this summer with people burning in such a long, dry summer?
I believe we did hear of one complaint, but we don't really hear a lot about that. That generally will go to the fire department as a concern for life or structure.
And how do we support the fire department?
We constantly support the fire department. Many of the local fire departments will actually refer any type of nuisance calls directly to us. So we're kind of the smoke nuisance regulators. They're fire safety, but we do communicate constantly with the fire department, and we They promote CBRD, know the rules, burning regulations.
Okay, so I am wondering if it will be possible or for you to report on repeat offenders and ticketing, how much ticketing you do, because we get, we kind of know what's going on, and I know we're compliance focused and we try and get people to be compliant, but I have heard there are concerns about repeat offenders and whether we are actually using all our tools as much as we maybe need to on some of the important issues.
Sure, absolutely. We could report generally on repeat offenders and any tickets associated with violations to that bylaw.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Director Abbott.
Chair, Mr. Harris, we have 9 areas and then something called REG. What's that referred to in your tables?
Oh, so that is what we refer to as regional. So when we go outside of the boundaries of the electoral area. So you may have noticed within the report, we did have 2 calls to homeless camps on the Bings Creek property on the old mill site on Drinkwater Road. That we were out there, but it's generally when we go outside of the boundaries to do our jobs.
If I may.
Yes.
I thought we were either a municipality, like a 4, or we were in 9 areas.
Yeah.
So we have spots that don't fall into any?
Yeah, so some of our waste management actually is regional. Also some of our parks bylaw is regional. Where the Cowichan Valley Trail runs through aspects of like the town of Chemainus, that is actually enforced by the park ranger.
Director Morrison, did you have your hand up?
Yes, through you to Mr. Harris. So I'm just a little curious in the area of, you've got a section short-term rentals, soil fireworks, and under zoning, the note says that majority of calls for service associated with zoning violations investigated were illegal suites, recreational vehicle use of a residence, commercial activities within residential areas. I'm getting specifically to the heart of, does commercial activities within residential areas refer to short-term rentals of larger nature? And the second part of my question is we've made a discovery in a couple of my communities that a volume of calls for repeat offending short-term rentals are helpful to staff. So how can we get the message to our communities to understand that if there's a prolific offending short-term rental property, that the one call by the neighbor isn't really cutting the mustard as far as getting the attention from staff that it's required?
Okay, so to answer the first part of your question, short-term rentals at Director Morrison's requests were singled out from zoning infractions. So commercial activities that are pointed out within those zoning infractions do not include short-term rental. Short-term rental is like any other investigation. It actually can be quite challenging at times because it's based on neighbor information. And, sometimes people dispute these allegations, and it's all about burden of proof. So if it's truly an issue within the neighborhood, we do encourage as many people to report it, which helps substantiate our case. And of course, they have to be, realize that they may be called to court to testify. So that is a bit of a deterrent. Going forward with the new announced changes and possibly access to a public registry for local government and some targeted areas that we're already scheming, such as advertising. If we can ticket for advertising, that should quell things real quickly. And you'll notice within that report, we're actually moving forward with the bylaw dispute adjudication system, which includes bylaw offense notices and sometimes, maybe not in your specific case, we have out-of-town owners. Very difficult to serve tickets to out-of-town owners that we find, and this bylaw offense notice system will enable us to mail a ticket to the person with a fine and keep mailing those tickets if need be, which apparently, talking to other local governments, can be extremely effective in a short period of time. So it's something we're targeting moving forward, and we know it's an issue.
Any more comments, questions? So maybe Ms. Charles for Mr. McDonald, do you need a motion to direct staff to add a little bit more information to these reports about repeat offenders and ticketing? Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, thanks so much, Mr. Ayers.
Thank you.
Ms. Cheroff wants to say something.
Apologies, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say if there's specific information about repeat offenders or specific properties, that we would be reporting to that in closed session, not in an open session. So we will endeavor to, make more information available in the reports to the extent that's possible within an open session report.
Yes, of course, thank you. So we're moving on to R8, I believe.
Report from the Emergency Management Cowichan Fire Rescue Services Strategic Services Division regarding boundary extension into Lake Cowichan Fire Protection Service area. That it be recommended to the board that the certificate of sufficiency confirming that a sufficient petition requesting inclusion into the Lake Cowichan Fire Protection Service area be received. And 2, that the CVRD bylaw number 1657, Lake Cowichan Fire Protection Service Establishment bylaw number 1994, be amended to include the properties described as PID 001-210-076, Plan 30889, Block A, Cowichan Lake District, Lot 46, Civic Address 5892 and 5894, Mayo Road, and PID 003-6920 809, Plan 30889, Block A, Cowichan Lake District, Lot 46, Civic Address 5818, Mayo Road.
Welcome, Mr. Schuler. Any questions for? No questions. Okay, it's moved. Can I have a seconder? Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. That was easy.
Thank you. R9, report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding 2023 CVRD Regional Active Transportation Plan. It was referred back from October 11th, 2023 board meeting. Its recommendation is for information.
And as we know, we didn't approve the money for this. We just approved the plan. Any discussion? Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I see that Brian's in the room here. I think the only thing that, and I've brought it up before, but I will bring it up again, is that I have a real concern about the cost per kilometre here. I just can't believe that the numbers of $700,000 per kilometre for and the reason I'm bringing it up is because I have plans for a very simple pathway of about half a kilometre in an area down a roadway in my area, which is very heavily trafficked with very large gas tankers. It's half a kilometre, and I don't have $350,000 to get that built. I have $65,000. So where do we go from here? I can't afford that. Certainly the residents can't afford that. And I can't understand where these numbers have come from, Brian.
Mr. Parkour?
Madam Chair, through to Director Wilson. So the numbers come, as you see in the report that was presented to the Committee of the Whole, from real on-the-ground work that's been done recently in the CVRD. In particular, one of the active transportation projects we have underway along Shawnigan Lake Mill Bay Road and some other projects we've done of late. We're having to build within the electoral areas to the standards and the guidelines as established by Ministry of Transportation, who's the road authority, and who's the owner of the road rights of way within the electoral areas. So it's not just within the CVRD, but it's within other regional districts that the ministry is allowing for development of active transportation initiatives. So we're beholden to the ministry as electoral areas to what the road authority will permit within their road rights of way. And that, in essence, is what is basically establishing the standards for the active transportation pathways, whether it's a widened shoulder, aka additional asphalt beyond the fog line, or where there's room to be able to build a separated pathway to their minimum 2.7 meter width standard. So that are the key elements that are establishing what the standards and the design are for the active transportation within the electoral areas. And the market, basically the contractors who are building these, are providing back to the regional district in real time when we're going to market to have these things built. So that is the basis for how that estimate is derived and is provided in the report.
Yeah, follow up, please, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brian. Refresh my memory then. We go to the MOTI and we get a letter of occupation. Is that the right term? In this particular case, the one I'm talking, if it's adjacent to the road, not on the road.
So, Madam Chair, through to Director Wilson, there's a couple of things. We get a permit to construct, and then we have to rent into what they call a license of occupation.
Right.
So there's two elements that will be attached to any application made by the regional district to proceed with any form of active transportation development within their road rights of way.
And then with that, they then say, if you're going to do this, you do it to this standard. Now, is that standard any different to our park standard?
Madam Chair, through to Director Wilson, yes. The standards that we are building the active transportation are as defined by the ministry. And this is what they have in terms of their active transportation guidelines. It's a province-wide document that they published several years ago. And so it's not building to CVRD park trail standards. This is active transportation. It's not parks and trails. So we're within the road right of way. We're building to a standard as defined by the ministry.
Okay, thank you.
Director Deck.
I understand that this is a sort of a high-level regional district transportation plan, active transportation plan, but I have to enforce and emphasize how strongly our communities feel, the higher density communities within Area I feel about having safe pathways there. So although I admire the whole concept, our priority has to be my priority, and the priority of our residents has to be transportation within the community.
Madam Chair, if I may, through to Director Deck, and staff don't disagree with that. We see within our member municipalities, a number of them have active transportation plans for within their municipal boundaries, defining how they see and prioritize connecting neighborhoods. Is it any different within electoral areas? We would presume not. This is, as you note, a regional plan, so it's about regional connectivity. I know within some of our Parks and Trails master plans that have been approved by the board over the years provide some guidance in terms of neighborhood and community connectivity by virtue of pathways associated with road networks. Other electoral areas don't have such plans, but we do know that there are priorities. And within this regional plan, a few things to note, and I thank Director Deck for catching. South Shore Road being noted in electoral area I, which I think to Director Morrison, well, if Area I would pay for everything there, he'd be very happy to see it in Area I, but that's an easy thing we can correct in the plan. The other is Mead Creek Road as an example. Mead Creek Road is with the Ministry of Transportation, but it was discovered a number of years ago where the road is and where the right-of-way is are not one and the same. And this has been an ongoing issue within the community in terms of advancing development of a roadside pathway. And this is attached to the Woodland Shores development, which has commitments, community amenity contribution commitments that this committee is aware of. And so the regional plan identifies that as a route because it's about connectivity between the communities of Yubo, Mead Creek, and Marble Bay, and the Town Lake Cowichan. Understandably, however, that it's going to be predicated on the ministry ultimately, at some point in time, resolving that issue they have in terms of where the road is versus the right-of-way. So in the short term, while we might not be able to develop a roadside pathway there, the long-term vision of the plan, being a regional network plan, is that the ministry will find a way to resolve that issue, and we'll be able to work with them to achieve that regional connectivity.
Thank you.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I'm slowly coming to the realization that those kind of costs, there's no way that this path is going to be built. And I take up on the point that Director Decker's brought up about safety with 20-wheelers going up and down a very narrow road there. So let's forget about the safety bit and concentrate on the cost bit here. What allowance do we have for any kind of volunteer input? Do we have to use a contractor?
Madam Chair, through Director Wilson, so it comes down to the direction of the ministry. It's within their road right-of-way. It comes down to their requirements. It comes down to safety. It comes down to traffic management. There are a number of factors that apply. So the contemplation of having volunteers out on a road edge building a pathway, that would be something we'd have to look at with the ministry, because again, you talk about public safety and 18-wheelers, having volunteers working right along adjacent to a very active road, that could be very concerning to the ministry. So we'd be taking their direction on that.
Would anyone else like to make any comments or discussion? Director Morrison.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And this is more of a comment. I read through as much of the report as I could and went back to table 4.1, which is the Regional Active Transportation Route Priority Evaluation. And I don't know whether I take exception with it or I've come to the realization that I think most of this is based on where the people are and how to best move the largest populations of people around. Because, you know, in viewing some of the criteria around, you know, weighted to accident areas, you know, obviously very important, but there's no history of accidents from Honeymoon Bay or Missachi Lake to Lake Cowichan where we want a trail, because nobody would dare use that as a route right now because it's too dangerous because of the large vehicles. So, you know, that wouldn't even be raised amongst people in the community. And so there's that issue. There's, you know, I think of groups like the volunteer groups like the Trailblazers who would love to do trail improvements to a couple of communities in my area, but clearly not at $700,000 a kilometer along the roadside. And so it just seems like it was kind of baked in that this is going to be for enhancing services to areas that already have access to trails. And it wasn't focused on getting areas that aren't connected to some sort of integrated network. So, you know, that's why I'm not posing a question to Mr. Farquhar, because it just seems like the basis of the report and its criteria missed the mark for some of the areas just completely. But has obviously made the mark for those that are east of the highway that want to improve, you know, networks and that sort of thing, because there's a lot of work done on that. So it's, unfortunately, this isn't going to help all of the people that have been reaching out to me about getting a roadside pathway or something from my two largest communities into the town of Lake Cowichan where we can connect up to the rest of the network. There's no mention of it, but it's probably the #1 trail comment made by residents of my community, and didn't meet the grade here. So it's a tough one. I think it's going to meet the needs of a lot of people, but it's certainly not going to meet the needs of people in my community. Thanks.
I concur with Director Morrison, and I'm going to add my 2 bits here. I really feel that we missed the boat with this active transportation plan, because I think this challenge that the rural areas had, is so different than what the municipalities face that it should have been clearly articulated in this plan. And the rating for the rural areas should maybe have been adopted to kind of deal with that, because the point of the plan is to leverage grant funding. and we ended up at the bottom of the heap, and so it's not going to help us with this cost issue that Director Wilson likes to point out all the time. So I feel that this whole thing has been sort of it has not worked for electoral areas. And I really think that we need to be pointing out at every chance that we get the challenges that we have with road safety. It's the number one issue every day. I get messages about it. So, yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may. So again, this is a regional network plan. It's not coming down into individual electoral area neighborhoods. It's not coming down into individual municipal neighborhoods. However, the plan itself, the ability to implement it is going to be based on grant funding and matching funds to go along with grant funding. So at the end of the day, I would suggest that within the electoral areas, if active transportation is a priority, active transportation is important, that a focus be given in terms of what the plan shows in terms of regional connectivity. We have 5 electoral area community parks trails master plans that also identify elements of active transportation within those plans. And if it's through the committee and ultimately the board, the priorities and ability to implement those priorities can be figured out, decided, implemented upon, then that provides the ability to go after grant funding and prioritizing within the electoral areas. No different than municipalities with their own active transportation plans and through their mayors and councils making decisions and giving direction to staff to go after project priorities within the municipal boundaries. So at the end of the day, there's a whole implementation element within the regional plan that hasn't been brought back to the committee or board as of yet. So certainly within the Electoral Area Services Committee, I think some thinking amongst you as a group could be moved forward as well in terms of deciding how best to move forward with active transportation within electoral areas, because similarly with the municipalities, there is no program right now for active transportation within the electoral areas. We're doing a little bit off the side with parks and trails, but that's not active transportation. We're just actually achieving a few little projects within the bounds of what we have available in terms of parks and trail staff resources, funded 100% by gas tax. But once that gas tax funding is spent, what's the next stage? How is active transportation going to be moved forward in general? And that's something that as staff, we look forward to further discussions.
Anyone like to say anything more? Then let's move on. Oh, you would, okay. Director McClinton.
Just through the chair, I'd just like to add that I agree with your point. I think, especially if this plan doesn't have any money attached to it. I mean, if we're going to dream, let's dream big and let's connect our communities. That would be my thought. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Dream big. All right, let's move on. R11, I think we're at. No,
R10.
R10.
Thank you. Report from the General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar.
Land Use Services Department regarding Development Services Modernization Delegated Authority. This report is for information.
Ms. Charoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the report is in response to the board direction to staff to report on the status of delegated land use authority. And I won't spend too much time going over information that's already in the staff report, but I will just make a few brief points to summarize. And that is to say that over the past 5 years, there has been an increase in delegation of authority to staff. The current authorities that are delegated to staff include issuance of development permits, making recommendations regarding minor liquor control, license and permit applications, discharging covenants where there are no longer any reasons to keep a covenant in place, and issuing minor development variance permits. And among those authorities, there hasn't been much activity in the last 3 that I noted, but obviously there's been a fairly high degree of authority exercised around development permits. And the report does note the number of permits that were issued in 2021, 2022, and 2023. In 2021 and 2022, we were working in a framework where some development permits were still being issued by the board. So the numbers aren't broken down specifically to what was issued by myself as the GM, but you'll see that in 2023, all development permits are being delegated to the GM, and the numbers associated with DPs issued in 2023. There are also a fairly high number of open files for 2023, particularly in Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake. And the reason for that large number is largely because it's a community with a lot of riparian areas. And that is the number one reason that we're issuing development permits is for riparian areas protection. In some cases, we issue development permits for multiple purposes, including things such as agricultural protection, protection of development from hazardous conditions, and sensitive ecosystems protection. I did note in the report also that there were 4 development applications that were denied over the last 2 years. 2 were for signs, 2 were for development permits involving infractions with riparian areas protection regulation and riparian development permit area. Only one of those applications was appealed to the board, and the board upheld the decision to deny the DP. That was for signs. Typically, when it gets to the point where a DP is going to be denied, the applicant will make best efforts to correct the application so that it is in compliance with our guidelines. But in the event that an application is denied, an applicant obviously does have the ability to appeal to the board, and then this body would review that application and give it a sober second thought. That is my report. I should note, actually, before I close, that it is good practice to review the authority that you have delegated to get a report like this on a regular basis. So we'll endeavor to do that as staff. And you have the ability to either increase or decrease the amount of delegation that you're exercising, and staff will advise on that, and we'll continue to report on how this is going.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald. Any questions for Ms. Gerald? Director McClinton.
Through the chair, thank you, Ms. Gerald. Just curious if perhaps you can't give a specific number, but you know, I'll take a feeling even on it. Like, has the delegated authority improved efficiency? Has it made things easier for staff? If you could just comment just in generally with the delegated authority and how that's working for the land use.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Director McClinton, that the delegation of authority for development permits certainly does alleviate the amount of time spent by staff preparing reports to committee and preparing presentations for the committee, attending committee. And it also reduces the amount of time to process an application because a decision can be rendered sort of immediately as opposed to having to come to committee and then to the board. So from that respect, the process is working quite well. We do have applications that will take a considerable amount of time and effort to process, and those are typically applications involving other provincial agencies, particularly around riparian areas protection. And one of the common issues that occurs is that an applicant will submit an application and a report to the provincial agency. It may be approved, and then they'll change their plans. Well, if the plans are not consistent with the report that was prepared for the provincial agency, that it actually has to go back to the provincial agency. and that can significantly increase the amount of time to process an application. And there's been a lot of frustration that's been expressed by applicants as a result of that, and we try to be really clear with applicants that they need to be, they need to be consistent in the information that they provide to us and that they provide to the province of BC. They need to be consistent in information that is provided to us from different professionals. So if they have a QEP preparing riparian areas protection assessment report, it needs to have the same type of information that might be coming from a qualified engineer or somebody evaluating geotechnical hazard, for instance. And sometimes there can be significant discrepancies in the information that we get from different professionals. We're very particular.
Director Morrison.
Thank you. And Ms. Chirolf, I'm enjoying this report because of the very small number of denials that I've seen here. And I think that's indicative of the sharper focus that staff bring to the processing of the development permits. And I just want to share very briefly that until we got into the harmonized and modernized OCP and soon the LAPs and the likes, my APC and a lot of folks were really resistant to bringing development permit areas into our OCPs and the like. And part of the reason was that a lot of those were still coming to committee and board for adjudication. And we were having denials of development permits for reasons that were outside of the jurisdiction of the development permit, which was causing delays in work being completed. 4 denials in the time frame here, that shows a level of efficiency, and that I think that that's something that our development community needs. They need efficiency and consistency. So I'm now encouraged that with the development of our new zoning and OCPs, that if there's a demonstrated need for development permit that will assist in protecting the environment or slope hazards or whatever, that we can bring them in and we can know that they will be processed in a professional manner, and we won't have the political vagaries of the work that we do cause unnecessary delays. So I think this is, I've been waiting to see this report, waiting to see the actual data, and I'm pleased and impressed by it, and thank you, Ms. Chirolf.
Director Martman.
Thank you, and yeah, I appreciate the comments by Director Morrison. And what I'm interested in here is maybe just understanding a little bit more about process, about the ones that are denied. And you said that these could go to the board if the applicant chooses. And if the board denies, is there any further avenue of recourse?
Through you, Madam Chair. So at the current time, development permits aren't coming before the board. So those applications, if they're denied by GM, the applicant, as you noted, would have the opportunity to come to the board. The legislation requires that there be an avenue for appeal. If you didn't delegate authority and development permits came here and they were denied, I mean, they can only be denied if there is non-compliance with the guidelines, and that decision would be final. However, of course, an applicant can challenge the decision of the board through the courts. So there's that is the avenue. So under this framework, the appeal process is to the board, which is I would say administratively less burdensome for an applicant than going through the courts.
Anyone else? I'm just, I'm thinking about how we evaluate whether our development permits, areas, guidelines, or whatever they're called, are doing what we want them to do. And we talked about having someone on staff at some point that had some biological expertise. Is that happening yet, or?
Madam Chair, that yes, that position is in the process of being screened by our Human Resources Division and our union.
So my comment is, we rely on this professional reliance model. And I recall when I looked at development permit applications for riparian areas, there was quite a lot of variability in the quality of the reports. And I know that the province is really just about checking boxes. They're not about diving into the details. And on top of that, when we do development permits, they're for a specific area, and the nature of it is not necessarily to take into context the broader environmental situation. And what we find is that cumulative effects are what kick us in the long term. And so while one little site looks like it's not causing much problem, when you start to add them all up, we have a big problem. So I think it is really important to have expertise on staff that can be evaluating how we're doing on this type from a sort of a broader perspective. And I look forward to that happening. Any other comments? Otherwise, let's move on. Thank you, Ms. Gerald.
Thank you.
R11.
R11, report from the Emergency Management Division regarding Community Emergency Preparedness Fund 2023 Volunteer Fire Department Equipment Grant Application. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant application in the amount of $210,000 be submitted to the Union of BC Municipalities Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Volunteer and Composite Fire Departments Equipment and Training for the purchase of the fire department equipment, wildland firefighting equipment, and peer support mental health training.
Thank you. Mr. Schuler is here if you have questions. Anyone got questions? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to R12, report from the Finance Division regarding Growing Communities Fund projects. The recommendations that it be recommended to the board on November 8th, 2023, that the Growing Community Funds be allocated between the Couch and Community Center roof replacement, the Stocking Lake Dam replacement, the three-stream curbside collection trucks, and Indigenous Relations Framework as follows: 27% or $1.549 million for the Couch and Community Center roof replacement, B, 46% or $2.6 million for the Stocking Lake Dam replacement, C, 27% or $1.5 million for the three-stream curbside collection trucks, and D, 3% or $150,000 to initiate an Indigenous Relations Framework.
Welcome, Ms. Mohan.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to let you know that our acting CFO, Tracy Bowen, is having some connection difficulties. So while she is available for questions by text, she won't be available live to present. So I'm going to do a quick summary of the report, and then I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion. So I just wanted to go into a little bit of the background. This committee and the board has received the information about the nature of this grant from the provincial government, and also in our July meetings, we provided the board with a lot of information about eligibility requirements. This particular funding has a lot of eligibility requirements associated with it. It was for a very specific purpose from the province, and so while we've informed the board and this committee about what those eligibility requirements are, and there was some information emailed after the reports were published so that you could find that eligibility information from July. There was also a process followed by the senior management team to come up with the recommendations in this report. So using those requirements and then going through a process of evaluating supplementary budget requests that had been submitted in prior years and perhaps not approved. We looked at those. We looked at supplementary requests that are approved, but perhaps we can displace funding with this funding instead of other methods of funding that had been identified through the budget process. And then new initiatives that have been identified as part of supplementary requests for the 2024 budget year, but they have to be connected to kind of works in progress, because one of the eligibility requirements of this funding is that it's not meant really for net new projects. It's meant to expand and facilitate things that are already in play. In general, that's sort of the flavor of it. So that was the process that the senior management team went through. We evaluated all those different supplementaries that were on the books that either were in play or had not been funded, and then we looked at their eligibility. We had quite a long list. There were probably 20 to 25 different items that came up for consideration, and then after looking at their eligibility, we reduced it down to a short list, and then among the short list, we've made a recommendation on 4, and then we've attached the other 3 that we feel are eligible for your consideration. And so that's kind of how we got to the recommendations in this report. There's a requirement by the province to allocate these funds by the end of the calendar year, but as is often the way with lots of our projects, we're constantly seeking out grant funding and other sources of funding and revenue to make these projects happen, even the ones that are recommended here. And so while we may identify these now, should any of them be recipient of future grants, we would be coming back to the board to talk about, displacing the allocation of funds right now with those grant funds and then reallocating these funds. So that's something to keep in mind as well. This is sort of a point in time recommendation. Okay, apparently Tracy's online now. So with that, I will hand it over to Tracy. Tracy, if you have anything to add, please go ahead.
Sorry about that, everybody. My Shaw decided that it didn't want to work anymore. It took a vacation. No, Barb, that sounds good. Everything that you've presented so far with the projects and what the Growing Community Funds is all about.
I have a question. I believe that we were told by the province that regional planning, growth management planning, could possibly be funded through this fund. And is that...
Yes, so to respond to your question conveyed through the Deputy Minister of Municipal Affairs, there was mention that the fund could be eligible for that, but also recognition that we have already received a grant from the province to do a community issues assessment for the South Cowichan, and there were other planning initiatives going on, local area planning, and also we've received a complete communities grant as well, so that there is quite a lot going on in the region. So, but to your point, yes, it would be eligible to use it for that.
So if it was determined to be a strategic priority for, the board, then that might be something we should be considering at this point.
Yes, Madam Chair, we are working with the province to set up that workshop that the board has asked for regarding regional growth strategies. If we're lucky, maybe we'll be able to do that in November. Cross your fingers. But that was the direction of the board, is that's where you wanted to start, is to have that workshop and then reassess whether you'd like to proceed.
So my question is, should we be setting aside a little bit in case we want to use it for that and decide in November?
Yeah, well, that is at the direction of the committee. Of course, it's your prerogative. To proceed with a regional growth strategy is a significant investment. So it would be a significant portion of this. And also, like Ms. Mohan has said, it needs to be allocated by the end of the year. So you'd have to make that decision before the end of the year.
Right, but we still have time. Okay, and anyone have questions for Ms. Bowen, Ms. Mohan, or Director Morrison?
I think I need some help with the definition of what's a regional project, and I think I gotta get this out there before I bust here, but I sent an email around everyone around the funding that was allocated for this, and our municipal friends have got about 15 million and we got 5, and we're told that I get this sense that what's ours is ours and what's yours is ours, And I'd like to know with some certainty if a regionally significant project to qualify for this, is it required to be a cross-jurisdictional? When I say cross-jurisdictional, is it required to have a municipal partner in it to be considered a regional project? And that's my first question.
So I'll try to take that, and then Tracy, you can add if there's anything further. So the answer is no, it does not have to be cross-jurisdictional, and it does not have to include a municipal partner. I think that what the province has stipulated is that the funds cannot be apportioned to electoral areas on the basis of population and then have independent control over what those funds are used for. The specification was that while a project may happen entirely in one electoral area, the decision to proceed had to be a board decision. It could not be an electoral area decision.
So if I could follow up. So I'm not casting aspersions on any of the projects that are here. They, clearly there's demonstrated need, but I just know that the impact of these grants have been substantial in electoral areas in the past. And so I have to ask the question about water quality in Cowichan Bay. Your predecessor used to come in here with a bottle of water that came out of a tap. Could there be significant investments into the improvement of water quality in, is it Lambourne, I think? In the Lambourne water system. Could there be, I think of the attempt a while ago to, and it's too bad Director Acton isn't here, but there was a push to see about linking sewer services between Shawnigan Lake and the infrastructure that's in Mill Bay. It would, there were initiatives like this that are, foundational to the electoral areas that don't even appear in the list. So I'm really struggling with such big allocations of dollars to big expensive projects, and I don't see the benefit of the, I shouldn't say measly $5 million, but the benefit of that $5 million being of impact to the electoral areas that previous grant programs have, like gas tax programs. So I know we can't allocate by population. I know that it has to be of a regional scope, but I'm reluctant to fully endorse with the numbers that we have before us, because I think there's other significant infrastructure challenges that we face that didn't appear on the list.
Yeah, Director Morrison has brought up some good points here, and I'm looking at the numbers here, and we're talking about regional again here, and so the Cowichan Community Centre roof, we're putting in, where was the numbers? I've seen the numbers here. I'm assuming then that this covers only our contribution. Are the other communities throwing in money to this as well, or is this only us?
Tracy, maybe you can answer,
Yeah,
or
this,
John can.
this is, because it's a function within the CVRD, it is us. There are other players at the CCC that pay for it in the regional rec. But there's such a small part that is the requisition within that would be paid. So no, it's not that unis will be paying into the CCC. The province has asked us to think very much regional with these projects and not be very into electoral area and like splitting it out to electorals. They're asking us to be very regional in our thinking and the projects that we're bringing forward for this money.
Okay, yeah, but
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit concerned if we're thinking regional here. We were asked to pay into the regional recreational plan, which we are doing, which includes all the munis and everybody else. So should they not be paying into the costs of some of these roofs. And the same thing goes for the Stocking Lake Dam. It says here is jointly owned by the Cowichan Valley Regional District, the town of Ladysmith, and managed under the joint, is the town of Ladysmith paying into the Stocking Lake as well? Or are we, again, just the regional districts?
So just to briefly respond, Madam Chair, so the portion included here on the list is for our half of the cost of the required replacement. It's not an optional, and we do need to plan for this project.
For the dam?
Yeah, for the
For
dam.
the dam.
For the dam, yeah.
Through the chair to Director Wilson. So there is no specific municipal contribution separate from the regional recreation funding, which includes municipalities as well as electoral areas for any expenses at the Cowichan Community Center. And of course, this is complicated by the fact of a 3-year implementation of the regional recreation funding formula. So the electoral area amount is increasing toward any project that happens at the Cowichan Community Center, but it is all in basically 4 functions which are funded both by electoral areas and municipalities. I don't know if that's clear, but there is only one basic funding source. There's no matching municipal funding.
Okay, so it's complicated. No, follow up on that one? And just, again, thank you, John. It just seems, it doesn't seem, it seems a bit weird that everybody's paying into the Cowichan Community Centre, and yet it's only the regional districts, the areas that are paying into the maintenance for the roof here. I just don't get that, but thank you for the explanation anyway.
Director Morrison?
So there is I thought I took up a lot of time. I've taken a lot of time up today, but my question around, so I'll just go to the letter C, because there's a tangible amount going to that and a corresponding savings to everyone that's participating in the 3 stream. It's $30. And you know, I don't know if there would, an increased amount, what the increased savings would be to the ratepayers that use that service, but there isn't the corresponding numbers that would help me to make a decision on the Cowichan Community Center roof replacement, because we're allocating 1.549 million, which is a big chunk of change, but what's the cost per 100,000 savings to the people that are paying into that function? Because if it was, you know, $11, $12 per 100,000, that might be a different consideration for me than if it was a couple of bucks per 100,000. So kind of missing some data on that, and the same would go with the Stocking Lake Dam replacement. So we're co-owners, we gotta contribute. Is there Saltair being one of the largest water systems or systems that we have at the regional district, what would be the $2.6 million contribution that would come from this fund? What is the savings to the Saltair water users for that? You know, is it $20 a utility bill? Is it $100 a utility bill? So in order to make that decision, I'd like to have that information, because we're starting budget, and it's moving money around that might be allocated to more impactful projects that weren't even on the list.
Okay,
Tracy received this question prior to the meeting, but I wasn't sure if she had enough time to provide any meaningful information. She's shaking her head no, so we would have to come back to you with those figures, so.
Because for the CCC, it's not just the CCC, it's also regional rec. So it's a combination of entries that I have to do to figure out what that would be, because there's going to be cost savings to regional rec, and there'll be cost savings to the CCC for this year, as John had mentioned, because we're in a phased in with the regional rec. The other one with Saltair, I believe they would have to borrow for that money, and that would fall on the Saltair water system.
What would the cost be?
I'd have to look into that, because I'm not sure what that borrowing is.
Director McClendon, do you have your hand up?
Thank you, through the chair. A little bit challenging for me to speak about this in a non-biased way, being that my residents are going to be the largest beneficiaries. that being said, we have the burden or the responsibility to, our regional district covers over top of the municipalities, and the municipalities, we sit above them. So there's going to be that overlap no matter what. I also think, just from some other conversations I've had outside of this, there's other factors at play besides tax dollars with these projects that have been picked, that I think, I think the staff have put a lot of time and have made some thoughtful decisions around that. So, yeah, I think that's where I'll leave my comments on that.
Director Martman.
Thank you. I guess when I look at this, I don't see C and D being too difficult to wrap my head around as options. But A and B, I stumble over because I think I lack data, like Dr. Morrison's saying. Because I'm looking for, in the end, in C and D, what is it that helps me? And I think one of the things that helps me is that I see it spread across all electoral areas. And that's very helpful because I can go back to my residents and say, you know what? We got a grant and it's going to offset some of the 3-stream curb collection. And I'm not sure I can go back and say the same thing for the Stocking Lake Dam, or I can say it for the Couch Community Center roof. And so I guess when I look at what other options might have been left off the table, do you see that there was other ones that sort of fit that same category of C and D that were sort of, you could see you can go back to the residents and actually say, yeah, there's going to be some savings over this budget.
Through the chair to Director Martman, so there is an addendum in the report with 3 other projects that were identified as meeting the eligibility criteria. And 2 of them are trail projects, I believe, or trail and trestle projects, which probably have maybe a broader impact in terms of the region. And the other has to do with site design at Bings Creek and potentially what's identified in the report is sort of the immediate next step for site design at Bings Creek, but it's anticipated that after that next step, there will be then other steps. And so there is an opportunity to designate funds for future phases of that project because it's in play. So I just want to reiterate that this funding is meant to offset funding that's already planned, projects that are already planned and in play, as opposed to new projects. So, and I think any kind of efforts to develop or improve services or change services at Bings Creek would have a more cross-region focus than similar to C&D in the report.
Yes, please.
Thank you, and I think that's where I lean to, it's, unless there's further data to come about that, so sort of look at the idea around A and B. I think the other question is, and this is my confusion around regional recreation, and trying to understand where the onus was as we moved into regional recreation on replacement of aging structures. I thought there was a liability that was left to the previous. Explain it perhaps about where the roof replacements fit in terms of who's responsible.
Yes, I'm going to let Tracy answer that one.
As I was going to look for John, because it is still a convoluted piece. Yeah.
I think the easiest way to answer that, Director Martman, is that there was 2 pieces around capital infrastructure related to regional recreation. So one is replacement of existing structures. So there's a roof there today. The roof needs to be replaced. It would be considered within the regional recreation funding formula. If there was an expansion of services for something that wasn't included today, we wanted to build a new pool or add another ice sheet or something of a large scale that would not be included in an existing facility, that would be outside the regional recreation funding formula and funded by those areas that wanted that expansion of service.
Thank you. So any more discussion? Would we like to refer it back to staff for additional information on A and B? I would add that the Stocking Lake Dam, from my perspective, is not ideal, but we do have a substantial risk with that piece of infrastructure, and if Ladysmith is willing to pay their share, seems to me like it's, might be something that we need to do.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So totally understand your line of thinking on this and respect that you're looking for more information. Just to point out that it was put forwards also with the thought of regional water security. We've been having a lot of discussions about looking at, water storage and water reservoirs and trying to invest in projects like the Couch and Weir. And so this one also bubbled up to the top as being another really important one for regional water security. And it provides water to, I think, 12,000 in the region? Right. So it's 12,000, and we did recognize that this year when we were trucking water into a number of our systems, how important that regional water security was. So it wasn't just thought about for one area of Saltaire, but thought more from a regional perspective as the province was asking us to do. So I just wanted to add that.
And that's why I think regional growth planning strategy is very important from a water perspective. Director Wilson.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify that I have no problem at all with the Stocking Lake Dam. I think it's absolutely essential as far as water storage is concerned. My main concern is with the roof and the way that's being funded.
Yeah. Director Morrison?
Yeah, I think, I don't have any problem with the list. I'm just thinking I would like to look at what the options are for funding it, whether it has to be that full amount that goes, if there's an amount that is reasonable to be added to the users of the system. And I do want to ask because, I think the ones that didn't make this list but are the additional ones are parks and park-related ones, but I'm just looking at the criteria of what's eligible for this, and it does include public drinking water supply and the issues like they're experiencing at Lambourne, and I think improving water quality for people and also wastewater conveyance and treatment. So, I don't know how those weren't part of the consideration, or I'd like to see, how low they scored. So I'd like to refer this back. I would like to have the fiscal data that comes with the either or and what the cost reductions are going to be for those to the users of both A and B. So
My question for Director Morrison is, would you be comfortable dealing with C and D today, or would you like the whole thing referred back?
it raises the question, if there were subsequent funds that were available, would a subsequent amount be allocated to C perhaps? Or, so it's sort of part and parcel. I guess if we were to move C forward, C and D forward, and if there were surplus funds that were going to go to at a later date, I guess we could allocate it at a later date. I know we're getting towards the end of the dates that we can allocate, but.
Oh, we have 2 months. We're okay.
I'm just, through the chair, I think that in terms of C and D, the amounts that are listed represent sort of the maximum you could use from this fund for that service. I'm not sure, maybe Clayton, you can expand on it, but my understanding is that of all the different costs associated with three-stream curbside collection, this piece, this purchase, this is the only piece that's eligible for this funding. So there wouldn't be an option of adding more to that piece if there were leftover funds after your consideration. So you could with confidence, if it was the board's or the committee's desire, endorse C and D and not have to worry about adding funds to those later.
All right, Director McClinton.
To the chair, thank you. I'm a little uncomfortable deferring, but, I will obviously go along with the will of the board. I just, a couple other things to point out, especially I know more about the Stocking Lake Dam. It does service Area H and the Diamond. It's water comes from there for the Stamanis First Nations. I think it ticks a lot of boxes. And again, there's probably some other significant considerations there that go beyond just tax savings. And I just, I'm feared, when it comes to local area, I'm pretty fierce. I think you guys see how I defend my area, but the mandate for this is to look at, through the region. And, again, I'm obviously going to be very biased with this. I think the staff has been pretty thoughtful with the funds they have, tried to identify some important projects. You know, if that, we all know that that Cowichan Community Center roof, it has to be replaced, and if it doesn't get replaced, it's going to lead to significant more costs down the road, like in a very short time. So, you know, I feel comfortable moving this forward as is. Yeah.
Sorry, as you were speaking, Director McClinton, through the chair, I just thought that I would clarify that the CCC roof is going ahead, like it's already started, it's underway. It's not a matter of should we do this project or not based on this funding requirement. It's already going. So this is really and that's one of the reasons why it's eligible, actually. And so this allows us to offset borrowing or other sources of funding the replacement that's already underway.
Director Deck, do you have your hand up? No. Anyone else?
I'd move the recommendation and refer A and B back for the fiscal data to come forward at the next meeting.
So you'd move the recommendation for C and D, and then we'll refer the other back. So maybe that we'll do that in 2 steps, shall we? Director Wilson? It does need to be seconded. Okay, so we're gonna refer the Stocking Dam part back as well. People are comfortable with that? And the community center. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve C and D. Any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Are you opposed? Motion's carried. And so now we'll entertain a referral motion. Director Morrison?
Refer A and B back for further financial data around impact to users and ratepayers. You know what I mean by that?
So information on how much, who's gonna, yeah, okay. Does everyone understand that?
To ask, sorry.
Yep.
How much are you saving by putting this 2.6 million in your interest on your loan? That's part of it? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any discussion on referral? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Well, I was only 20 minutes late. Director McClinton?
Moving along, there's no unfinished business, no new business, and we move to question period. And we have one. The question period is an opportunity to offer the public to ask a question regarding the business of the CVRD. The question period allows for an allotment of 15 minutes and is comprised of 2 parts. The first is reserved for questions directly related to agenda items. If there is a time remaining for questions, may be asked on public interest related to CVRD jurisdiction. Each questioner is permitted to ask 1 question plus 1 follow-up question related to the answer. The question must be truly a question and not a statement of opinion or speech. Questioners must avoid personal references, insinuations, violent, offensive, or disrespectful remarks about another person or unparliamentary language. I'd like to also note if the question cannot be answered today, it will be answered in the next public ESC meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, have you got a question?
Madam Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Madam Chair, on today's agenda, Wake Lake was mentioned. It seemed to have quite an environmental area to it, quite a riparian area. And there were a lot of toads and amphibians mentioned, but I didn't hear any mention about fish habitat. And that's connected with the Chemainus River. So it seems to me, wouldn't that be wise to keep that whole area as a riparian area? Because that would be an awful big water sink for the Chemainus River, which I understand runs dry every year.
Mr. Evans, first of all, Wake Lake is in the Cowichan watershed, for starters, and really most of the riparian area around the lake is protected, except for one side where there's a residence that has property there. But the western toads, the issue is that they need forested habitat for overwintering because they bury underneath logs and stumps and so forth. So they need forested habitat. And that's the issue that we're trying to deal with.
Okay, as long as it's done in an environmentally friendly way, I
We're
guess that'd be
we're
good,
trying,
but
we're trying.
It seems to develop a big environmental area is almost a crime today.
Well, the toads actually will hop 3 kilometers to find a good winter place.
Okay, I'll believe you, Madam Chair. The other thing was on R10, on the covenants. And the CVRD has a lot of covenants for water, especially up around the Stebbings Road area. And I noticed that an APC turned down a development permit where they wanted to split the lot because there's a covenant in there for water. That's a very important part of our watershed. Will the will the general manager be able to get rid of covenants that have anything to do with CVRD water? I mean, should this not be spelled out that they go through the board?
I believe covenants do go through the board.
Well,
But I will check on that. I will check on that, and we will get back to you next meeting, okay?
Yeah, I just thought that when they were describing what the new delegation things were, that covenants was part of it, and riparian areas.
I will check with Ms. Cheroff and report back to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, could I have a motion to adjourn? And seconded, and all in favor?